Thank you, Teemu Kokko, for opening this seminar. And our next speaker will be Päivyt Tallqvist. She's media director for Finnair, Finland's legacy airline, and she's been working for Finnair since 2011. So lots of experience. She'll be talking to us about Finnair's responsible strategies.
Thank you.
How's yourself?
So, welcome on my behalf as well. I'm honored to be able to speak to so many people who know probably a lot more about aviation than I do. So, my topic today is about responsible air travel. A few years back, this was in early 2017, I was taking part in a Finnair session where we were talking about different kind of trends and developments in the industry, everything from where cargo flows are going to how the Asia-Europe travel is developing. And in that session, it was the first time when we very seriously, had a long and a thorough discussion about the topic of what if flying is no longer socially acceptable? What does that mean? Fast forward to autumn 2018 and the IPCC report, and I think every one of us who is working with aviation has had to address that question in one way or another, in a coffee table discussion or in social media or in some other context. So in my presentation, I will tell you a little bit about how we approach this at Finnair and how this industry is approaching this topic. Let me see if this is working. Oh, yes. So Finnair is you probably all think that you know what Finnair does, but I'm still going to go through a few facts. So for us Finns, Finnair is the airline that connects us to the world, but actually we are a really big player in connecting Europe and Asia, not just Finland. About 60% of our business is actually from Europe-Asia traffic. We were established in 1923, so we are one of the world's oldest continuously operating airlines. We currently have 100 destinations, roughly, give or take a few, in Europe, 19 in Asia, and 8 in North America. That includes destinations such as Havana and Puerto Plata and Punta Cana as well. We have about 6,500 employees. We've recruited about 2,000 employees over the past few years, so that tells something about the rate of growth we have experienced. And we carried over 13 million passengers. That was actually it should be 2018, but I was already thinking about the future of aviation when I was doing these slides, so excuse me for that. I think this year we will probably carry more than that. When we think about aviation, it's not about just Finns traveling to their holiday to the Canary Islands or flying out to Stockholm for the weekend. Aviation is a really global business. Here are some figures from ATAG. So we are talking about a business and operations that has about 4.4 billion passengers per year. We have about 120,000 flights per day. Finnair flies on a very busy Friday during the summer peak season. We fly probably 350 flights per day. We are talking about over 3,700 airports and over 32,000 aircraft. Finnair is operating 83. There are 1,300 roughly airlines. They keep on appearing and disappearing, but anyway, the overall the industry is growing. This is an industry that employs tens and tens of millions of people. This is an industry that plays a huge role in where goods are transported, how they are transported, where businesses are being established, how different regions develop, how world peace is formed ultimately. This is not about Finns flying to a summer holiday. This is about how the global world works and operates, and aviation plays a huge role in that. If we then take a look from this angle to what Finnair does, so our purpose is to enrich life by bridging the world. That's why the 6,500 Finnair employees come to work every day. We have obviously a big role in our home market in Finland by providing the extensive direct connections that benefit not just the ones who go on holiday, but all the businesses, the government officials, different kind of organizations who operate globally. And then we connect Asia and Europe, and in doing that, we bring a lot of travelers and a lot of business people to Finland. Cargo is a huge part of our business. It's a very important part of all of our long-haul routes and many of our European routes. The cargo that we carry flies with you, the passengers. It's in the belly of the aircraft, so we don't have separate cargo flights. So when you are taking a Finnair flight to Shanghai, you are traveling most likely with a lot of pharmaceuticals. When you are taking a Finnair flight to Tokyo, you are traveling with a lot of salmon. They are underneath you, wrapped in ice and ready to be taken to a sushi restaurant in Japan. We are a major player in tourism to the Nordics. The tourism industry is a big employer in Finland. It plays a big role in keeping Finland alive, not just southern Finland, but the different regions, whether we are talking about Lakeland or Archipelago or Lapland. The Finnish Lapland has actually been the #1 destination for our Chinese travelers for the past few winters. So Finnish Lapland is beating Rome and Paris. And that's actually quite sustainable, because when you go to the Finnish Lapland, you're actually not going there to buy Louis Vuitton bags and sort of eat caviar. You're going there to experience the Finnish nature, the pure air. You're going there for the experiences, not for the material. We are a huge employer, so it's been calculated that the total GDP impact of the Helsinki airport, sort of the Aviapolis area, where obviously Finnair is a major player, is about 4% of Finland's GDP. That's about the same as Nokia had in its very top peak years. And I know because I worked for 12 years in Nokia. So I've seen that part too. Now, in doing all of this, it's obvious that we also create an issue. We create carbon dioxide emissions. Every single aircraft that takes off from Helsinki airport or any other airport is actually creating emissions. In this slide, I've listed here on my left, which is probably your right, if I'm right, or left. So about 97% of our environmental impact comes from the aircraft, from the fuel consumption. So it's obvious that that's a lot of where our focus is right now. And that's why I'm talking about that one as well. But we also have other environmental impacts. There is flight noise, which is a very important factor, especially when you are living around an airport, which increasingly is the case for a lot of people. Sometimes the target to reduce noise actually results in creating more CO2 emissions because of the flight patterns that you have to fly to avoid creating noise. There is the energy consumption of properties. So for example, we have solar panels on top of our cargo terminal at Helsinki Airport, so the place where the Norwegian salmon sits for a while before it flies to Asia. And then there is cabin waste, the food that people and the other products that people consume on board. So we are addressing all of these, but 97% of the impact comes from the fuel consumption. We fly about 130,000 flights per year. Norra, our partner company, flies a part of these, but the majority is flown by Finnair. Our CO2 emissions in 2018 were over 3 million tons. And with that figure, we were actually listed as the #1 polluter in Finland. But this is our global traffic, and I think there's a steel factory in Raahe or somewhere there that has about 4. No, we were #2 because there's a steel factory. One steel factory that produces more CO2 emissions. So it's obviously that we are tackling the issue of CO2 emissions. The biggest solution for us is technology. We have invested in A350 aircraft It's a modern aircraft that cuts fuel consumption by about 25%, and it's actually delivering on the promise. We currently have 14 A350s in operation. We have 5 more to come by 2023, and we already see this in our fuel efficiency figures, the impact of those aircraft. Fuel efficiency is something that we think about every single day with every single flight. 1% improvement in fuel efficiency, which sounds like nothing, it's actually 10 million kilos of jet fuel, which then corresponds to saving of over 30 million kilos of CO2. Now, our ambition, as we believe that air travel will continue, it will not stop because it has such a huge role in the world. Our ambition is to be the best choice for responsible air travelers. So we believe that there is a way to do this in a responsible way. There are a number of levers that we use to curb our CO2 emissions. The first one, as I already mentioned, is technology. The A350 plays a huge role in our fuel reduction targets. It has been the single largest environmental investment Finnair has made during this decade. There are operative measures. The first one that we look at every single day is the aircraft weight. So all the materials that go into aircraft have an impact on the fuel consumption. So everything we think about the tableware that is used in the business class. That's made out of porcelain that is about 15% lighter than regular porcelain. We have eliminated the paper magazines, and instead we provide digital newspapers via the aircraft's portal, Wi-Fi portal. We recently made modifications to our European fleet, and we made some changes to the cabin layout and to the seat layout, and that resulted in reducing, on average, 150 kilos from the dead weight of the aircraft. That translates directly into fuel savings. For the microphone, I thought that I could just continue with my mother of 3 voice, which is fairly loud. Thank you. There's also a lot of focus on fuel efficient flying. And what that means is like everything from the ground, from the time when the aircraft is still on the ground. Is it plugged in to the electricity at the airport, or is it using its own engines to power it? How we taxi. We have trained our pilots to one engine taxi procedure, which results in fuel savings. During the flight, there's a lot that the pilots can do to optimize fuel consumption. And we also have software in use in our A350 aircraft that enables pilots to optimize the flight levels. And for example, to take use of the winds, because the wind and where that goes, that's the single biggest impact on how fast the aircraft can fly outside of obviously the engines of the aircraft. So you can, with good tailwinds, you can actually fly slower and still be there in time because the wind will help in that. There's better use of infrastructure. This, in the Nordic countries, we are in a fairly good position in terms of the airspace because we can optimize flight routes utilizing the different winds and different flight levels. This is not the case in all of the, in everywhere around the world, especially in congested airports. Airlines sometimes have to wait and fly in a holding pattern, wait for a landing turn, whereas in Helsinki airport, I was actually trying to think that have I ever been in any of my flights at Helsinki airport, have I been in a situation where we would have to be circling? And I couldn't remember one single flight. I'm sure there are cases like that, but at Helsinki airport we have 3 runways, so there's very little time that you have to wait in the air, which then turns into efficient flying. So we use the continuous descent approach at Helsinki Airport, and maybe Mikko from Finavia might be touching upon that as well. So that saves both fuel and noise. Basically, if you probably notice that when you start, or when you come from, for example, from Asia, that you kind of the landing procedure starts somewhere over Russia already, and then you just come down in a very, very nice continuous slide. Single European sky, so the efficient use of airspace in Europe would be a very important target to achieve. It would save travel time for passengers, it would save a lot of fuel, it would save a lot of CO2 emissions. Then there's biofuels. Everyone in Finland is talking about biofuels and aviation, and it's an important topic, and it's definitely a part of the solution. However, there are no sustainable aviation fuel continuously available in Finland. The only place in the world where it is continuously available currently is California, where there's actually built a system and incentives to support the production and use of sustainable aviation fuel or biofuel. And that's why, for example, Finnair has our biofuel partner is Sky Energy, and the biofuel that we will hopefully in the future use more. Currently we don't really use biofuels except on sort of some individual flights. So that comes from the World Energy Refinery in Los Angeles, and as we fly to Los Angeles year-round, the biofuel doesn't have to be transported a long distance, which is a very key part of the equation. So we believe that biofuels are a part of the solutions, but the availability and the price really need to be addressed. There is no continuous availability currently, and then when it comes to the price, it's about 3 to 5 times more expensive than traditional jet fuel. And if you think that the fuel bill is about 25 to 30% of our costs, can't really threefold that without having an impact. So these first 4 levers are what we are doing on a continuous basis, and when they are not enough, because they are not enough to reach the industry targets and the targets that we have, then we use market-based methods, out of which the EU emissions trading scheme is already in operation. And for example, last year we paid about 12 million euros for emissions rights within the EU. CORSIA, the Global Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation, is starting. The reporting starts this year. Finland is a part of that because it is something where the states are committing, not airlines. Last year we paid about 45 million euros in different kind of environment-related payments. And it's likely that these payments will increase in the future when the price of carbon offsetting increases. And that's something that we as airlines need to be prepared for. We also launched an initiative earlier this year where we invited our customers to join in to the offsetting and biofuel. And there has been different kind of offsetting options available already before, but we wanted also to give a solution on our pages so that it's easy for our customers to use, and they can also, for example, use their frequent flyer points to that. So we launched Push for Change, which is basically you can choose to offset the CO2 emissions of your flight by supporting a carbon offsetting project, which takes place in Mozambique, and it is a gold standard verified project, so we know that the carbon reductions are real, or you can support the purchase of biofuel. And Finnair will then sort of collect, for example, the biofuel payments and then fly biofuel flights that are partially funded by our customers. We recently added, or sort of announced that we will be adding a rewilding, a swamp and wetland rewilding project into this, and when we're also going to add Compensate, which is the service that was recently launched in Finland. So those will be a part of this solution. Right, so for us, responsibility means that we minimize our environmental impacts, and that's the work that is being done by every single person working at Finnair. Whether it's the people who are planning the flight routes, the people who are loading the aircraft, the people who are working inside the aircraft, they're responsible for the customer service, or whether it's the pilot flying the aircraft. But responsibility is also other aspects. It's about regarding all people as equals. It's about providing accessible services. It is about the social responsibility towards our employees. And it's about collaboration with key stakeholders within the industry to set and define joint targets, and then with different kind of stakeholders to actually spar and learn. We learn a lot from our collaboration partners about what are the matters that are important in their work, whether we are working with UNICEF or the Finnish Nature Conservation Foundation. So collaboration is very key, that we gain more understanding and can actually then improve our own operations. So we believe that only responsible business can be sustainable, and our target is to grow in a sustainable way. There was today, Sitra published a list of things that every Finn should do to achieve a responsible lifestyle that is in line with the 1.5 degree target. And there are a lot of personal choices that every one of us need to make in order to live a more sustainable life. In Sitra's list, I was reading it with great interest. There were a lot of suggestions for what to do in terms of your what kind of food you eat, how you heat your house, how you move from one place to another. There are also personal choices involved in air travel that we can do. And these are the kind of things that everyone who gets on a plane really should be thinking about. Number one, choose an airline that has a modern fleet. Fuel consumption is the single largest environmental impact of flying. Second, fly the shortest possible route. If you are going to east, don't go south first. It makes absolutely no sense. If you are going south, don't go west first. Start heading to the right direction from the start. It's interesting how people make really uneducated choices when they look at just maybe what is the absolute cheapest way that I can get to a destination, rather than looking at what is the smartest way in terms of my time, CO2 emissions, and in the end, the ultimate cost. Combine flying with other modes of transportation. We offer, for example, in Germany, we have a collaboration with Deutsche Bahn. So when you fly to any of our 7 German destinations, you can actually combine a train ticket to the flight ticket. So you can go to 5,600 destinations in Germany. Now, honestly, I didn't know there are 5,600 destinations in Germany, but there are. And by having this sort of intermodality, a smart combination of different modes of transportation, that makes the travel chains much more fluent. It can save also CO2 emissions. So combine train or bus or other public transportation with flying whenever possible. And then pack light. Sounds like a tiny little thing, but if every Finnair passenger last year would have packed 1 kilo less, that would have saved enough fuel to fly 20 times from Helsinki to Tokyo. 1 kilo. That's like jeans and a t-shirt. Or it's the extra shoes. This is actually a discussion that I have with my daughters. I have teenage daughters, and we talk about flying, we talk about CO2 emissions, and we talk about what is it that we can do to make sure that when we travel in a more responsible way. And I think our record was that we spent 4 days in Osaka, the 3 of us, and we had 1 trolley with us. And I think it weighed about 8 kilos. It was perfectly fine. And then they didn't really feel the need to buy all the junk that they usually would have bought, because I said that, well, is this really worth carrying in an aircraft? Do you really want to have this piece of plastic forever? It will never disappear from your life if you buy this piece of plastic. So we said no to a lot of the kawaii shops and came back with very little and with very sustainable gifts, mostly things that we ate. And then finally, offset your emissions. You can use the Finnair service, you can use a number of other services. I think what's important there is that you use a service where you see that the projects where the money goes, that they are verified, they are certified, so that you can really know that carbon is coming off the atmosphere because of your payments. So, can there be a responsible aviation? I think there can. It's one of the reasons I still work in an airline, because I can see that there are a lot of things that we can do, and I see that there are a lot of things that we have done. The discussion has been around responsibility and sustainability has been very heated over the past 6 months or so, but the work hasn't really changed. We continue to do the same things in a very systematic manner as we have been doing for a long, long time. And that's the way to get to the destination. Thank you. Now I'm trying to find our MC there. Do we have time for questions?
I think we have a few questions, so if you have any questions, please lift your hand up and we'll bring you the microphone. Okay, well, maybe I'll ask a question. So,
All right.
what do you think would be the single most easiest way for a passenger to offset the emissions or be more responsible? So, what would be the single easiest way?
I think that the single easiest way is look at where you are traveling and how. That don't go after the absolute cheapest weird route that you can find that takes you hopping half a way across the world with 3 landings and 3 takeoffs, because the landings and takeoffs are the ones where fuel is burned more. And if you fly hopping like this, yes, in the end you might save 20 euros, but you are producing much more CO2 emissions, and in the end you're actually going to spend more money. So for me, it's about choosing the right route. So I fly Finnair whenever I can, but if the shortest route is with another airline, and if they have a relatively modern aircraft, I can fly with them as well. Because in the end, that's what counts, is that the actual emissions. And those come from the route, those come from the aircraft that is flying the route. So look at that. Think about it when you are traveling. And then it's a very easy thing to do, to find a project that feels good for you for the offsetting. I personally use the Finnair service because for me the project in Mozambique, it made a lot of sense, and it also has an impact on the lives of girls and women. And I happen to have 3 daughters myself, so it's very easy to convince me that it makes sense to support positive developments in the life of girls and women. But there are different kind of projects. There are forestation projects, there are rewilding projects that you can support. So there are plenty of opportunities. But it all starts with that: choose where you fly and with whom.
Thank you. So if there's no questions...
Seriously, you have no questions? Yes.
You got the mic there?
Hello, my name is Jani Hyppänen. I'm a student here at Haaga-Helia Porvoo. I wish to ask you about the offsetting of emissions. I know that, for example, Scandinavian Airlines is already offsetting automatically, I think about 40% of all of their flights, or tickets, I'd say, for example, for their Eurobonus members, and if you're traveling on a youth ticket. Have you considered doing this not voluntarily, but like included in the ticket prices?
Yeah, we have considered different alternatives, and we choose to go with the voluntary method because we also think that it's important that people think about it, rather than think that, oh, someone else has taken care of my sustainable lifestyle. It might be that there are different alternatives offered by airlines in the future. We are also the only one who offers also the support for biofuel, and that has been clearly very interesting to some of our customers, like companies, and then also individual travelers. So we chose that route. Yes.
Hi, I'm Rafael. I'm an international business student at Arcada, and I wonder if Finnair has considered towing the airplanes longer so that they can reduce the taxiing time and use less fuel.
We have considered pretty much everything. So all of our ground transportation trucks that we use, they use biofuel. So first of all, that one. And then the taxi out method is something that we have implemented. So it's a taxi out with one engine, which then saves fuel. And then there are also different kind of things about when the aircraft is on the ground. So like when you are still there at the gate, you can actually be plugged into the power system of the airport rather than using the auxiliary power units. So we do consider all of the aspects, taking into account Operational aspects, CO2 emissions, and then obviously safety, which is always our key priority. Yes? Yeah. A very detailed question. I'm probably not able to give such a detailed answer, but we are looking into, I mean, obviously biofuels are a part of the answer. Anyway, the costs for airlines will rise in one way or another. Investing into new technology requires resources. The future will require big investments from airlines, which then means that we need to have profitable operations as well. Biofuel is definitely something that we see being part of the solutions, but it has to be produced where it's most efficient to produce, and biofuel production cannot compete with food production. So it has to be sustainable in every way. Whether those targets, how they will be met, remains to be seen. We invited this spring, the leading aircraft manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus, to Helsinki to talk about how they see the future of aviation. And Glenn Livellen from Airbus, he's in charge of their electrical propulsion development. And if we trust him, he says that in the 2030s, at some point in the 2030s, there will be electrical aircraft. And he was talking about zero emission aviation already. So there are a lot of developments that need to happen in the industry, and not the least in the technology side.
All right, I think that's the time for the question for now. But if you come up with any questions today, please memorize them, and we'll have a panel discussion, which Päivyt will also be joining, so we can make some space for audience questions in the panel as well. Right, thank you, Päivyt.